In this video, what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to work on skipping. So again, one of the hardest things to do is to deal with skips. For us in the treble clef, whenever we're reading in the treble clef, it's really easy for us to oftentimes skip upwards to find the notes. But when we go down to the bass clef, it's really, really hard trying to skip downwards. So that's what we're going to go ahead and work on. And we're going to work on it based on just the letters. Now, what's really nice about this worksheet is that at the very, very bottom, there's this reference point. So again, if you ever are trying to kind of practice, again, you can kind of trace along how the skips go, right? So if I started on C and I'm skipping up, I skip over D to E, skip over F to G, skip over A to B, then to D, and then so on and so forth. Now this one specifically is quite simple in terms of what we're asked to do. It says write the letters, the skips away, right? So now specifically these are going to the right. So again, on the staff, it would look like we were going up. But let's say that we started on C and then we're skipping up, right? So we want to go ahead and write the letter that's a skip away. So again, going back to this reference, if I'm starting on C and I'm trying to go a skip away, I just skip over D, right? That's what we're doing when we skip. When we step, we would be going from like C to D, but with a skip, we go ahead and skip over D so that we land on E. So that's the first one. After C, we would get E. Okay, so C skips to E. Then what we end up having is we start on E, we have to skip again, right? So E skips to G, right? So E skips to G, and we can go ahead and fill that in. Now you can of course use that reference point. I'm just gonna go ahead and keep this up here. But after that, we end up skipping to B. Then you ask yourself, okay, where do we skip to next? Now remember, there's a couple of ways to think about this. You could visualize your keyboard, or you can think about it in terms of the letters of the alphabet. So we have B, so it would be A, B, C, D, right? So we skip over the letter C, we should end up on the letter D. If I keep going, A, B, C, D, E, F, right? So D, E, F. E would be a step up, so we have to skip over it to get the skip, which is F. And then we end up on A. So A, then all of a sudden when we're skipping, it goes A, step up would be B, skip up would be C. And then at that point, we have kind of returned back to that C, right? And so the skips kind of repeat themselves. So now we would end up going to E. But that's the skips if we were going up. Again, if I were to go ahead and do that down here with the reference, all you'd have to do is you'd have to start on C and then just skip a letter. So C to E, then E to G, then G to B, and then B to D, then to F, then to A, and then we end up landing on C at the end. Now in terms of at the bottom, it says write the letters and then skips to the left. So this time what you're going to do is you're going to start on the right side here where we have C. And this is something, again, you can do this with the letters if you wanted to be at the piano and, start from middle C and then make your way down by skips and see that. That works as well. But I personally find that this is a good way of really being able to find these skips in a different way rather than having to rely on the keyboard. But we start with C. So again, what we're doing is we're skipping backwards, right? So again, it's that idea of going backwards in the musical alphabet. So instead of thinking A, B, C, D, E, F, G, which is forwards, we think G, F, E, D, C, B, A. So when we start on C, again, it's that last part of the backwards alphabet, C, B, A. We can also see that down here, right? If I started on C and I went backwards, I would end up skipping down to A. Again, that's why we have this reference here. But the letter that you would end up writing in here would be A. Then if I started on A, where would I go, right? A is the beginning of the alphabet, so what we have to do is we have to really go to the end of the alphabet. So we have C, B, A, then it goes to G, F. So again, what we have to do is we skip over the G and land on F, right? So F here. Then it skips down to D, right? And we can see that right here. Skips down to D. So then my question ends up becoming for you, and you can go ahead and pause this if you'd like, but try and figure out the next two without me, right? So go ahead and pause right now. And then whenever you end up doing this and coming off of the pause, so if you're still watching and you haven't paused yet to write these in, I would go ahead and pause. But specifically after this D, where do we end up going, right? That's what we have to think about. So again, you can use your reference. So we would go from D, we would skip over C, we land on B, so that's the first one. So we would have B here. Then what we would do is starting again on that B, we skip down to G, right? So we would have G. And then here we have E, again, so G skips down to E, then E specifically skips down to C, right? We skip over D, we land on C. And so you'll notice as I'm going through, by the way, that the skips for the top as well as the bottom are like the same skips, which is really, really nice. Now, of course, here we aren't really able to use our reference down here in order to get the last skip. But again, that C is the same as saying this C. So again, if we have C and we're skipping down, we would end up having A, right? We would skip over the letter B, we would end up on A. Okay. But this has been our practice with skipping. Again, one of the things that you really want to get used to is not only skipping up, right, and to the right, but also skipping down to the left. That one's always going to be harder because the alphabet is backwards. But thank you for joining me in this video, and hopefully this has been helpful for you practicing your forwards and backwards skipping.